Hey everyone, in this video we're walking through every question in Module 1 of Practice Test number 7. That's 16 questions. For each one, I'll read the passage, show the question, pause so you can think, then walk through every wrong answer, and finish with the correct one. Question 1 of 16. We're opening on a hard one. Stay focused. This passage is titled The Social Dynamics of Innovation. The passage argues that the Industrial Revolution was driven not just by inventions like the steam engine, but by the social network connecting inventors, entrepreneurs, and workers. The question asks how the author illustrates the profound impact of those social exchanges on the era's progress. We need a choice that captures the rhetorical move the author actually makes, setting visible machinery against the invisible human relationships that powered innovation. Look for language about contrast between tangible and intangible elements, rather than a critique of technology or specific manufacturing case studies. A misreads the purpose. The author acknowledges traditional histories, but does not set out to challenge the role of technology, only to supplement it. C fails because the passage never offers detailed examples of specific manufacturing improvements. It stays at a general level. D inverts the author's point. The social exchanges are described as less visible than industrial growth, not highlighted alongside it as equally visible. Choice B fits precisely. The passage juxtaposes smoking factory chimneys and patents, the tangible outcomes, with the less visible web of partnerships and informal exchanges that made those outcomes possible. That contrast between the seen and unseen is exactly how the author conveys the importance of social interaction. Question 2 of 16. Another tough one. This passage is titled Cultural Assumptions in Economics. The question asks how the author supports the claim that economic theories often overlook the role of cultural assumptions. The passage argues that traditional models assume rational self-interest but ignore how cultural norms shape behavior. We need the specific rhetorical move the author uses to back up that claim. 3 options paraphrase ideas from the passage, but only one identifies the actual evidence the author offers in support. Choice A simply restates the assumptions of traditional economic theory, which is the view being critiqued, not evidence against it. Choice C describes a tension between collective well-being and self-interest, but framing that contrast does not itself show theories overlooking culture. Choice D mentions studies, yet the passage references them to highlight cultural influence rather than to compare cooperative and competitive strategies head-to-head. Choice B is correct because the author points to indigenous communities where cooperative practices persist even when competitive strategies could bring greater material rewards. That concrete example demonstrates culture-shaping economic decisions, which is exactly the support the claim requires. Question 3 of 16, a medium after that. This passage is titled The Alphabet Revolution. The passage traces the phonetic alphabet from its origins more than 3,000 years ago, contrasts it with earlier pictorial and cuneiform systems, credits the Greeks with adding vowels, and links the innovation to broader literacy and the rise of European intellectual life. The question asks which choice best states the main purpose of the text. We need an option wide enough to capture both the historical arc and the societal effects without zooming in on a single supporting detail like vowels or Greek culture, and without reframing the passage as a head-to-head comparison. Choice A overstates the brief mention of pictorial and cuneiform systems. Those references set up the phonetic alphabet's significance rather than drive a sustained comparison. Choice C narrows the purpose to vowels, which appear only as one detail about the Greek refinement. Choice D limits the scope to Greek influence on literacy, but the passage frames Greek contributions as one stage within the alphabet's larger development and impact. Choice B fits because the passage moves through the alphabet's emergence, its phonetic innovation, the Greek refinement, and the resulting democratization of literacy. Highlighting the historical development and impact captures every section of the text rather than any single supporting point. Question 4 of 16. Now it gets harder. This passage is titled Global Smartphone Market Trends 2015-2025. The passage presents a table of smartphone shipments and market share for 5 companies across 2015, 2020, and projected 2025, and analysts specifically predict the most notable shift will occur between Company A and Company D. The question asks which choice most effectively uses table data to support that claim. Because the claim names Company A and Company D as the focal pair, the supporting evidence must directly contrast those two companies' trajectories using numbers from the table. A choice that only describes one unrelated company, or that mentions just a one-sided decline, will not fully support the comparison. Choice A cites accurate numbers, but only tracks Company A's decline, leaving Company D's rise unaddressed, so it does not capture the shift between the two. Choice C focuses on Company B's growth, which is real but irrelevant to the A and D comparison the claim names. Choice D points to Company C's stability, which contradicts the idea of a significant shift entirely. Choice B captures Company D's rise from 9% in 2015 to a projected 28% in 2025, and notes that this increase overtakes Company A by the end of the period. That single sentence pulls precise figures from the table and frames them as the A versus D shift the passage highlights, making it the strongest evidence for the claim. Question 5 of 16. Still hard. This passage is titled, "The Role of Keystone Predators in Ecosystem Stability." The passage describes Dr. Vargas's hypothesis that keystone predators sustain biodiversity by checking dominant prey species, using intertidal starfish as a key example. The question asks which finding would most directly support that hypothesis. We need evidence showing that the presence of a keystone predator correlates with greater biodiversity, since that's the precise mechanism Vargas proposes. Choice B notes that sea otters eat a wider variety of prey, but dietary breadth alone says nothing about whether their presence boosts biodiversity. Choice C describes urchins' changing behavior under predation pressure, which is tangential and doesn't link predators to overall species diversity. Choice D actively undermines the hypothesis by suggesting biodiversity thrives even without the ecosystems keystone predators help maintain. Choice A fits perfectly. Kelp forests with sea otters showing higher biodiversity than those without parallels. The starfish observation, a top predator's presence corresponds to a richer ecosystem, directly reinforcing the claim that keystone predators preserve diversity. Question 6 of 16. Another tough one. This passage is titled Changes in Global Water Usage by Sector, 1980 to 2020. The passage describes global water consumption trends across agriculture, industry, and domestic sectors, claiming that industrial water usage, while still substantial, has grown more slowly than other sectors. The question asks which choice most effectively uses table data to support that observation about slower industrial growth. To support the claim, we need data that directly compares industrial growth to growth in another sector, showing industry rising more slowly. The right answer must put industrial figures side by side with another sector's figures across the same time span. Choice B compares domestic and industrial usage but emphasizes an industrial peak and decline, which addresses fluctuation rather than the slower growth claim across the full period. Choice C states industry had the smallest increase but only gives a total figure, never quantifying the other sector's growth for a real comparison. Choice D focuses solely on agriculture's dominant share and ignores industrial water usage entirely, so it cannot support a claim about industry's relative growth. Choice A delivers exactly that comparison. Agricultural usage climbs from 1,200 to 1,800 billion cubic meters between 1980 and 2020, a 600 billion cubic meter jump, while industrial usage moves from 600 to only 750 billion cubic meters, a much smaller 150 billion cubic meter increase. That side-by-side contrast directly demonstrates that industry grew more slowly than another major sector. Question 7 of 16, a medium after that. This passage is titled The Invention of the Printing Press. The passage describes how Gutenberg's 15th century printing press transformed Europe by lowering book production costs and helping spark the Renaissance and modern education. The question asks which choice best describes the primary purpose of the passage. The choice is split between a narrow technical focus on Gutenberg's struggles, a broad claim about cultural and intellectual impact, a comparison with older printing technologies, and a specific link to the scientific revolution. We need the option that captures the passage's overall thrust, rather than a side detail. Choice A misses the mark because the text never discusses the technical challenges Gutenberg faced. It focuses on impact, not engineering. Choice C fails because no detailed comparison with earlier printing technologies appears in the passage. Choice D zeroes in on the scientific revolution, which is not even mentioned here, and even broader outcomes are listed only as examples rather than the central topic. Choice B fits because the passage emphasizes the press's sweeping effects on society, revolutionizing the spread of information, catalyzing the Renaissance, and shaping modern education. Those are exactly the cultural and intellectual consequences B describes. Question 8 of 16. Now it gets harder. This passage is titled "The Social Engine Behind the Industrial Revolution." The passage argues that the Industrial Revolution was driven not just by famous inventions, but by the social network connecting inventors, entrepreneurs, and workers. We are asked how the author develops the contrast between visible and invisible forces shaping that transformation. The choices describe 4 possible techniques: pairing concrete imagery with abstract ideas, prioritizing technology over social change, citing statistical comparisons, or offering specific collaborative examples. We need the option that matches the passage's actual rhetorical strategy. Choice B misreads the emphasis. The author calls the social dimension equally crucial, refusing to elevate technology over it. Choice C invents data that is not present, since the passage works qualitatively and never cites statistics. Choice D overstates the detail given because, while collaborative partnerships are mentioned in general terms, no specific examples of partnerships are described to develop the contrast. Choice A fits precisely. The author sets the tangible image of smoking factory chimneys against the abstract, less visible web of social relationships, partnerships, and informal exchanges. That juxtaposition of something we can see against something we cannot is exactly how the contrast between visible and invisible forces is built. Question 9 of 16. Still hard. This passage is titled "The Social Engine of the Industrial Revolution." The passage argues that the Industrial Revolution was driven not just by inventions like the steam engine, but by the social network of inventors, entrepreneurs, and workers who shared and refined patents. We need to identify how the author emphasizes the transformative role of those social relationships. The choices offer 4 different rhetorical strategies: highlighting hidden but vital elements, critiquing technology, presenting quantitative data, or drawing a cross-country contrast. Our task is to match the author's actual move to one of these descriptions. Choice B fails because the author never critiques technology. The passage complements inventions with social factors rather than dismissing them. Choice C is wrong because no figures or quantitative measures of output appear. The discussion stays qualitative. Choice D misreads the scope. The passage focuses entirely on Britain's internal dynamics and never contrasts its approach with other industrial contexts. Choice A fits precisely. The author calls the social dimension of innovation less visible than smoking factory chimneys, yet equally crucial, which is exactly the framing of highlighting an underappreciated but essential element of industrial change. Question 10 of 16. Another tough one. This passage is titled "The Role of Social Collaboration in the Industrial Revolution." The passage argues that the Industrial Revolution was driven not just by inventions like the steam engine, but by a network of social relationships among inventors, entrepreneurs, and workers. The question asks how the author emphasizes the significance of that social collaboration. We need a choice that matches the actual rhetorical move the author uses. The options offer 4 different techniques: a direct contrast, statistical data, descriptions of exchanges, and a hypothetical scenario. We have to pick the one the text actually performs. Choice A is wrong because the author mentions technology and social relationships, but does not set them in direct opposition. Instead, both are treated as crucial. Choice B is wrong because no numbers or statistics about patents or collaborations appear in the text. Choice D is wrong because the author never poses a hypothetical scenario imagining the absence of collaboration. The discussion stays grounded in what actually happened. Choice C fits because the passage explicitly describes how patents were shared, modified, and improved through both formal partnerships and informal exchanges in Britain's industrial cities. By detailing these specific kinds of collaborative interactions, the author shows readers what social collaboration looked like in practice and why it mattered. Question 11 of 16. Staying in hard territory. This passage is titled, "The Balance of Preservation, Modernity Meets Tradition." The passage describes a row of Ottoman-era bazaar buildings in Old Damascus, where preservationists champion the cultural value of intricate woodwork and faded grandeur, while modernizers push for sleek, glass-fronted establishments that could attract tourists and boost the economy. The question asks how the author illustrates the tension between tradition and innovation in preserving architectural heritage. The choices propose 4 different rhetorical strategies, juxtaposing competing arguments, using rhetorical questions about indifference, narrating physical decay, or critiquing aesthetics over functionality. We need the option that matches what the text actually does. Choice B fails because the passage poses no rhetorical questions about societal indifference. It presents 2 competing positions instead. Choice C is wrong because, although the buildings are called faded, the author does not narrate physical decay as emblematic of neglect. Choice D misreads the modernization side, which is praised for economic potential rather than critiqued for prioritizing aesthetics over functionality. Choice A is correct because the author sets the preservationists' cultural argument about identity and heritage directly against the modernizers' practical and economic vision of a contemporary marketplace. This side-by-side juxtaposition of cultural versus economic advocacy is the very mechanism that dramatizes the tension. Question 12 of 16. Another hard one. This passage is titled, "Avian Vocal Learning Patterns." The passage describes how zebra finches learn songs by imitating adults, while certain subasines develop species-typical songs without social exposure, which researchers attribute to a genetic basis for vocal patterns. The question asks which finding would most directly support that claim. To support the claim, we need evidence that subasine songs emerge independently of learning from other birds. The strongest answer will isolate subasines from social input and show their songs still appear normal, pointing to genetics rather than imitation. Choice B describes zebra finches failing to sing without adult exposure, which supports the learned song side of the contrast but says nothing about subasine genetics. Choice C notes that both groups share vocal production brain structures, a similarity that does not address whether subasine songs are inherited or learned. Choice D actually undermines the claim, since heavier reliance on auditory feedback implies a learned component rather than a genetic one. Choice A fits exactly. If subines raised in isolation still produce songs similar to those heard in the wild, social exposure cannot be the source of the song. That leaves an innate genetic explanation as the most plausible one, directly reinforcing the researcher's hypothesis. Question 13 of 16. Still hard. This passage is titled, "The Role of Social Relationships in Industry." The passage argues that the Industrial Revolution was driven not just by inventions like the steam engine and power loom, but by the network of social relationships among inventors, entrepreneurs, and workers. The question asks how the author conveys the significance of those social relationships. We have 4 options: one about challenging a technology-only view, one about shared patents fueling innovation, one about informal cultural exchange beneath formal partnerships, and one about creating a metaphor between visible progress and intangible networks. Choice B narrows in on shared patents, but that is just one example supporting the broader point about social networks, not the author's main rhetorical move. Choice C zooms into informal exchanges, yet the passage treats both formal partnerships and informal exchanges as parts of the larger social dimension, not as a culture versus business contrast. Choice D claims a metaphor exists between visible progress and intangible networks, but the author draws a literal contrast, calling the social dimension equally crucial rather than figuratively comparing the two. Choice A is correct because the passage opens by acknowledging the traditional emphasis on inventions, then explicitly states those inventions alone did not create the Industrial Revolution. By positioning social relationships as the true engine of change, the author directly challenges the view that technology was the sole catalyst. Question 14 of 16. Another tough one. This passage is titled "In the Shadow of the Forest." The passage paints two neighboring places, a village bathed in morning sun with children's laughter, and a dense pine forest that feels like a cathedral of gloom. The question asks how the author uses descriptive language to establish the contrast between these two settings. Each option proposes a different mechanism for the contrast: word choice and tone, sound alone, a blending of qualities, or sheer size. We need the option that matches the actual descriptive techniques on the page. B is wrong because the contrast is not exclusively auditory. Visual imagery like shimmering rooftops and emotional words like trepidation carry just as much weight as sound. C is wrong because the author does not blend the qualities of the two settings. They are kept distinctly opposed, even if villagers view the forest with mixed feelings. D is wrong because no size comparison drives the contrast. The passage never emphasizes the village being smaller or the forest being larger as the key device. Choice A is correct. The village gets warm, cheerful diction, gentle warmth, shimmering rooftops, vibrancy, laughter, while the forest gets foreboding, mysterious diction, unyielding pines, gloom, unseen creatures, trepidation. That deliberate split in word choice is exactly how the contrast is built. Question 15 of 16. Staying in hard territory. This passage is titled "Key Drivers of the Industrial Revolution." The passage argues that the Industrial Revolution was driven not just by inventions like the steam engine, but by a network of social relationships among inventors, entrepreneurs, and workers. The question asks how the author's word choice emphasizes the transformative role of that social collaboration. We need to identify a specific rhetorical technique the author actually uses and pair it with language pulled directly from the passage. The right answer should point to vivid wording that elevates the importance of social ties over mere machinery. Choice A misreads the emphasis. Formal partnerships and informal exchanges appear together to show range, not as a pointed contrast. Choice B overstates the tone since the author expands traditional histories rather than directly criticizing them. Choice D fails because the passage offers no statistics about partnerships. Its argument is qualitative, not numerical. Choice C captures this perfectly. The phrase, "the true engine of change," is a metaphor that reassigns the driving force from machines to human relationships, while smoking factory chimneys is an evocative image used to contrast visible industry with the less visible but equally crucial social dimension. This metaphorical language is precisely how the author underlines social innovation's critical role. Question 16 of 16. Final question, and it's a hard one. This passage is titled "The Role of Collaboration in Science." The question asks how the author develops the argument that collaboration matters in scientific advancements. The passage opens by pushing back against the popular image of the solitary genius, then offers examples of teamwork driving breakthroughs. Each choice describes a different rhetorical move: critiquing the lone genius myth with examples, listing events chronologically, emphasizing logistical hurdles, or questioning the value of discoveries themselves. We need the option that matches the passage's actual structure. Choice B is wrong because the examples are illustrative, not arranged as a chronological timeline of events. Choice C fails because the passage never mentions logistical challenges of collaboration. It focuses on collaboration's necessity and benefits. Choice D misreads the argument. The author celebrates these discoveries rather than questioning their significance, emphasizing that collaboration enabled them. Choice A fits precisely. The author challenges the lone genius narrative explicitly in the opening sentence, then backs that critique with concrete evidence of collaborative work, citing Rosalind Franklin's contribution to the DNA discovery and the interdisciplinary teamwork behind the World Wide Web. That pattern, critique plus supporting examples, is exactly what A describes. That's all 16 questions for Module 1. Pause the video and count up how many you got right. If you found this helpful, like and subscribe. I post full walkthroughs like this for every practice test. Good luck on test day. You've got this.